combat veteran and former member of the United States Congress, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, is our very special guest today, Thursday, October 5th, 2023. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden. You're watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Learn more at americansforprosperity.org and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. Our guest today is the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union and ACRU Action Fund. He is a constitutional conservative, combat veteran, and former member of Congress, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Alan, good morning, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on, Ben.
Well, I got to tell you, so I love having first-time guests on, and I purposely go out of my way to not really learn that much about someone that comes on, because I want to learn kind of organically, as everybody else is at the same time. But I did see your bio, and I read through this, and I'm not kidding. I looked at him like, wow, you're making the rest of us look bad. What a jerk.
Well, no,
holy cow.
You can go to eBay and you can buy a resume. I mean, it's out there. It's pretty cheap. I think a few of them are on sale. So, look, I'm just a very humble guy. I've been very blessed in my life to be able to, serve and sacrifice and commit to the principles and values of this country. And that's been my guiding light. And I will tell you that when you look at my father, my older brother, my nephew now, we have all served. My father-in-law served in the Army, all combat veterans. And so that's just what we do. That's our calling card.
Well, let's actually go through. I mean, first of all, to go through your resume, it would take like 4 hours. So let's try to get it maybe to a little shorter, because really a lot of the times it's just to get to know the character of the person. And in order to do that, it's just really just start having a conversation about whatever. Let's start about just some of your information. So where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in 1961 in Atlanta, Georgia. As a matter of fact, I was born in a blacks-only hospital. I grew up in the same neighborhood that produced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That's the old Fourth Ward neighborhood in Atlanta. It's a very historic neighborhood. If people are familiar with Sweet Auburn Avenue, Ebenezer Baptist Church, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, all of those are part of the old Fourth Ward neighborhood. And my elementary school, Our Lady of Lourdes, was right in between Ebenezer Baptist Church and Dr. King's birth home.
What? How many times have you told that story? And what's the number one question you get asked as a follow-up to that?
Well, I think that a lot of people, ask me, what did that mean for you as a young kid, and what was the impact? And I will tell you that when you were born and raised in that area of history, and first and foremost, I had two great parents. And I think that's one of the things that is hurting our inner city communities right now is most young Black kids do not have two very good parents in the home. I had a dad who was a World War II veteran. I had a mom who served, some 25 years as a civilian servant to a Marine Corps district headquarters there in Atlanta. And so they just taught me right from wrong. They instilled in me discipline, and they, let me know that this was a country where I could achieve whatever dreams and desires that I wanted. And so that leads me back to what Dr. King talked about, was his dream of his children growing up in a country where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. And that's what my parents stressed to me, is not to look at the color of your skin, but always think about the impeccable character that you want to hold.
So with that, having those two parents in the home that loved and supported and cared for you, did that have an impact on what you decided to do when you left? Because you went, and I don't know what age you went into the military, but was that a part of that? Were they encouraging you to do this?
Absolutely. If my parents were alive today, they'd probably tell me I need a haircut because it's too high on the top or something like that. But, my dad at the age of 15 sat me down. We were on the steps of our house, 651 Kennesaw Avenue, Atlanta, Georgia, 30308, 404-874-2836. And he told me at the age of 15 that there was no greater honor than to wear the uniform of the United States of America. And he wanted me to be the first officer in the family because he was an enlisted man in World War II. My older brother was an enlisted Marine who fought in Vietnam. And so I started wearing a uniform in high school junior ROTC at the age in 1976, 15, 16 years of age. And then I went on to the University of Tennessee, Army ROTC program. And 31 July 1982, I was commissioned as the second lieutenant in the United States Army.
So you knew why the Army, by the way?
Well, it was a tough choice. Dad wanted me to be a soldier. Mom wanted me to be a Marine. But, kind of had to go with Dad.
Yeah. So in 1982 was when you first started, or first went in, right?
Yeah, 31 July 1982 was the date that I got commissioned.
And what you said, lieutenant? What was your rank at that time?
Second lieutenant. That's starting off. That's the ground floor when you become an officer in the military.
Got it. And then you were there for how long?
22 years. 22 years. I retired 1 August 2004.
I'm sorry. Is that 32?
No, 22 years.
22. Okay, I thought I misheard that.
1982
22
to 2004.
years. And you finished, of course, with lieutenant colonel, right?
Yep.
So just kind of walk through. So that first time when you were in 1982, so what was going on during this time? Let's say your first quarter of this, first 5 years.
Oh, my first 5 years in the military, I was commissioned as an artillery officer. So I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I did very well in my basic officer's artillery school. So I was selected to go to an airborne unit in Vicenza, Italy, which meant that I had to go to Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I also had to go to Jump Master School right after that. So my first 3 years in the military was spent in Vicenza, Italy with the 325th Airborne Battalion Combat Team, a great unit. I ended up seeing a lot of different parts of Europe. And at that time, you still had the wall that was up. We still had the Cold War going on. And I will not forget 1985, we had a training rotation up to West Berlin because they had this very incredible, they call it Combat in the Cities facility, which taught you urban warfare. And that was one of our missions and tasks we had to do in our airborne unit. But, while I was there, we got one day to put on our dress uniform, spit shine jump boots, maroon beret. And we got on the bus and we went through Checkpoint Charlie, Ben. And when you go through Checkpoint Charlie, which I think a lot of young people today don't even remember or know what Checkpoint Charlie was, that was when you went from freedom and liberty to the other side. And up close and personal, as a 24-year-old young man, I saw communism, I saw socialism, I saw Marxism when we went over and we came out in East Berlin. And when you go into the stores, you don't see the stores, properly, stocked with goods and services. You see depression, despondency on the faces of the people. You look up there on the buildings and you see the surveillance cameras. You had the East German Stasi, the secret police, following you. And the people over there did not want to make eye contact with you or speak with you because they knew that the Stasi would probably pick them up. And so that had an incredible effect on me and the rest of us who, that was our first time going over to East Berlin and to see what we saw. And how strange it is in my lifetime that the exact same principles that, led to the collapse of the Soviet bloc, the Soviet Union, now people are talking about bringing it here to the United States of America.
Well, there is that. that is kind of. Oh, sorry. It looks like my father is watching. Terry Dryden. He puts love the military haircut. He's going back to haircut and dress sharp. Father, it was actually just retired sheriff here in Washington County for 28 years, 40 years in law enforcement, I think, and he's a veteran of the Vietnam War as well. So thank you, Dad.
Tell him I said welcome home.
There you go. See? Oh, isn't that nice? So after this, what was the first conflict? Wasn't that was that the Persian Gulf? I don't think we call it wars, do we? Is it conflicts?
No, I mean, look, if you're in the middle of it and someone's shooting at you, it's not a conflict, it's a war, okay? All right, let's get that very
fair point. Fair point.
Yeah. So Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that was my first combat tour of duty. And I come back to the United States, gone to my artillery advanced officers course back at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and I got an assignment to the 1st Infantry Division there in Fort Riley, Kansas. It was a great assignment, and met my wife there, who was a professor at Kansas State University. Both of our daughters were born there in Kansas, but I did deploy in 1991 to the Persian Gulf into Kuwait and up through Iraq, and it was an incredible experience. And the thing was, my father had passed away, but my father-in-law and my older brother, who are Vietnam veterans, we had some good conversations, and they talked to me about going into combat and the things that I should know as far as being a leader, and I was a captain at that time, so I had two promotions from second lieutenant to first lieutenant to captain. So it was a very interesting time.
Um, what was, if you could sum up, and there's no way you can possibly do this, but if you can, try to anyway. Um, how long were you deployed over there during the Persian Gulf War, and what was that experience? If when people ask you, what was that like during that time for you?
It was 6 months.
Okay,
And of course, you're going to be very nervous about this, but we were well trained. We were well prepared. I don't know how many people are familiar with the National Training Center, which is out in the Mojave Desert near Barstow, California, Fort Irwin. So I think that we were masters of open desert warfare, and that's something that we had done several training rotations on. So we were pretty confident in our abilities, and thanks to Ronald Reagan, we had seen an incredible modernization of the United States military. We've gone from the old M113 armored personnel carrier to the Bradley fighting vehicle, from the old M60 tank to the M1 Abrams main battle tank. We had upgraded our artillery systems. We had Apache helicopters instead of the old Cobra helicopters, and we had multiple launch rocket systems. So we had an incredible combined arms fighting force. And then, of course, the Air Force had probably the best close air support aircraft since was the P-51, I believe, in World
sure.
War II,
Yeah.
and that's
Yep.
the A-10,
Yeah.
the A-10, the Warthog. So we took on this quote unquote one of the largest militaries in the world, and we whipped them in 96 hours. And so we felt pretty good and confident. And I remember coming back, and the first thing I did, Ben, before I called my mom and said, Mom, I'm back home, I called my older brother because Desert Shield, Desert Storm was a very important war for us to win because we had to get over the hump from Vietnam. And I just wanted to tell my older brother that, hey, we did this, and we got them for y'all in your generation.
It's interesting. I'm going to bring this up. Tomorrow has commented, absolutely salute this man. You should write a book, sir. It would be so inspiring, which we'll bring that up in a little bit because I saw it in your bio. You have written 3 books.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll get to
I,
that in a second
I'm
here.
over, I'm
But I want,
overachieved.
yeah, I know. Where is, so you're over there now. You're still in there. When your wife married you, did you tell her, this is my career? Where is she in all of this? Uh, is she supportive of this during this time, or is she like, okay, that's nice, honey, but it's time to come home? And now that you're back home, I don't want you going back. Was she in your corner, or is a little bit of pushback?
Well, you have to understand that my wife's father served 24 years in the United States Army. He
My
did two
God.
combat tours of duty in Vietnam as an infantryman in the 23rd Division of Meritorious, and her father is buried with honor in Arlington National Cemetery. So she knew who I was, what my career aspirations were, and she was completely all in and very supportive of it.
Mm,
And I'll never forget that night when we were there in Robinson Gym there on Custer Hill at Fort Riley, Kansas. And she kissed me, she hugged me. We took a beautiful picture. She was smiling, and she said, "I'm proud of you. I love you, and I'll see you when you get back."
shut up. I mean, isn't that great? Where would we be without our wives in our lives?
No, we wouldn't be anywhere. And like I said, when what they say is very true. Behind every successful man is an even more successful and strong woman.
Yeah, 100% agree. So after all of this, I'm not all of this, but now we're about almost halfway through your time there. What was next
Yeah.
for you?
Well, what was next was the military looked at me and said, "Hey, you've had two operational tours of duty. You've been with a combat unit as a lieutenant. You've been with a combat unit. You've gone to combat. We're going to send you to some of these other assignments, either going out and training the reserves, going out and recruiting, or teaching ROTC." And so I said, without a doubt, I'd like to be an ROTC instructor. And as I said, it was very fortuitous that right next to Fort Riley, Kansas, is Kansas State University, where my wife was a professor, and I was able to get on at K-State and teach Army ROTC there. And I will tell you, I don't know how many people have seen the movie 12 Strong, which is about the horse soldiers that went into Afghanistan very early on and worked with the Northern Alliance against the Taliban and Al Qaeda. But the leader of that Special Forces A team, that was our initial response after 9/11, was one of my former cadets. And so it was just so humbling, because having myself just come out of combat, my perspective in training those cadets was for them to be ready to answer the call of the nation. And who would have ever thought that one of my cadets would be out there leading a Special Forces A team immediately right after 9/11?
That's incredible. I forgot to ask you. You said you did some plane stuff. First time jumping out of a plane. I've never jumped out of a plane. I never will. You couldn't pay me enough money to do that.
I got to tell you, you're all pumped. You're all psyched up. Airborne School is 3 weeks long. The first week is what they call ground week. And basically, you just throw yourself on the ground, learn how to land, left side, right side, forward, backward.
Easy, I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but do it for like 8 hours straight every day. Okay, you start to get a little bruised. The next week is what they call tower week, where you learn how to jump out of the 34-foot tower. And then we used to have the 200-foot tower back. And then the last week is jump week. And of course, everyone's pumped. Everyone's psyched. Everyone wants to be airborne. But let me tell you something, Ben. When they open the doors of that aircraft and it's going 135 miles per hour through the air, it makes a sound that humbles you. And it was so interesting when those doors opened up. Everybody, all 64 of us, we kind of like piped down and looked and said, am I really going to do this?
Yeah.
And, when I went through Airborne School, I was an officer. So I had to be first in the door. And so here you are looking down, 1,000 feet up, ground's going by pretty fast. And you're saying, the green light's going to come on. I got to do this. And so it was exhilarating to jump out. But you come to learn that you hit the ground pretty fast, and you got to wrap up your chute. You got to be ready to go. You have to have that mentality. But it was an exhilarating experience to do it. I ended up being a master-rated parachutist and a jump master. So I have 73 total jumps that I did in my military career.
My goodness. So as always, like our shows, there's nothing off topic or nothing that we don't want to bring up, just anything that pops in. But there's always some times where I think of a question and I go, I don't know if I should ask it. So I'm just going to make me do push-ups if it's inappropriate. But as a black man, 1982, second lieutenant, is that common back then? What was your experience like? Was it in the military? Nobody cared about that stuff. Like America may or other countries may, but in the military, nobody cares.
No, we didn't care back then in 1982. And that's why I don't like all this cultural Marxism and all this oppressor and oppressed, rhetoric that's coming to our military. Look, my dad taught me a very simple thing. He said, find out what the standard is and exceed it. It's not about your color. It's not about anyone trying to make you to a victim or you trying to, portray yourself as a victim. You get out there and you compete. And you let everyone know that you're the best of the best. And I remember the motto of the Army back then when I came in was "Be all you can be." What a great motto! And now they have gone back to that because we're having such a problem with recruiting and retention because of the ideological agenda of the left has seeped into the military. But that was the thing. The military is about a certain standard. If you weren't 6 feet tall, you couldn't be, in the old guard. You couldn't be up there in Washington, D.C. You couldn't, guard the tomb of the unknown soldier. You had to run a certain, pace. You had to do X amount of push-ups. If you couldn't do it, you couldn't stay in. If you had flat feet, you couldn't join. And so that if you were overweight, you could not stay in. So standards are important. And I think that's one of the things our culture needs to get back to. Instead of me hearing people talk about how math is racist, 2 plus 2 equals 4. It has nothing to do with white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. So we've got to start with this cultural Marxism. We have to stop with all these excuses that we're making. And Ben, I will tell you, one of the worst things that, adults ever did to kids was when they came up with this stupid participation trophy crap.
Not a fan, huh?
No, no.
Yeesh. All right, so you brought up something that I wrote down. I want to get to that too, but I don't want to forget where we are here. I want to get through the rest of your career. So then what was after this? You are now, at this point, you're a captain still, right? At Kansas State.
Yep.
Then what?
Well, I was captain in Kansas State. And when you're married to a woman that has an MBA and a PhD, a bachelor's degree just ain't good enough. So, so I ended up getting a master's while I was there at Kansas State, and then I told her, honey, I've been very successful here at K State. We have seen a resurgence in the program. It's one of the best Army ROTC programs in the country. It's time for me to get back into the operational Army. So for the stability of our family, I volunteered to go to Korea to be on the DMZ in the 2nd Infantry Division for a year. And while I was over in Korea, I was promoted to major. And then I was also selected to go to the Army Command and General Staff Officers College, which is at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So after my year there in Korea, I came back to Kansas to Fort Leavenworth, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where my family was in Manhattan. So I had a little dump apartment down there. I'd go home every weekend, or they'd come down and visit and be with me. While I was at the Staff College, we had our second daughter. Aubrey's the first, Austin is the second daughter. And so I spent a year there. And once again, a woman that has a master's, MBA, and a PhD, she told me that one master's wasn't good enough and I had to get another master's. So I ended up getting the second master's from the Army Command and General Staff Officers College. And in 1997, I got selected to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. It will always be Fort Bragg. It's not this Fort Liberty or this other crap that they've renamed it to. But went to Fort Bragg, and I was an artillery regiment operations officer and a battalion executive officer as a major. So that takes you through about 97, 98, 99.
And that was only a few years left before you left. So so is that the next step? Because I'm unfamiliar with what the ranks are. Lieutenant Colonel, is that the next after Major?
Yeah. After Major comes Lieutenant Colonel. And so I did very well there at Fort Bragg with the 18th Field Artillery Brigade Airborne and the 1st Battalion Air Assault 377th Field Artillery Regiment. And then I was selected to go and do an exchange assignment with the Marines down at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which is just a couple hours from Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. So once again, for the stability of the family, we were able to keep them there, keep the girls in school, keep our house that we had up there. And I had a little dump apartment. And it was very lovely down in Swansboro, North Carolina. They come down and visit. We go to the beach and everything like that on the weekend. But it was while I was at Camp Lejeune that 9/11 happened. And I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget that night of going through all of the courses of action and starting to do initial operational planning, because I was with the Marines. And if there was going to be an initial response to 9/11, it was going to involve the United States Marines. And I really thought that I would end up deploying with the Marines overseas to Afghanistan or to wherever. But while I was there, I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel. And I was also selected to command a battalion in the Army, an artillery battalion. So I spent 3 great years there. And in 2002, I packed up the family from North Carolina. We went to Fort Hood, Texas, and I took command of an artillery battalion in the 4th Infantry Division.
For those of us who are unfamiliar with the terminologies, battalion, what does that encompass? What's underneath the umbrella of a battalion?
Sure. Let me give you a basic understanding. A squad is anywhere from about 8 to 12 soldiers. When you have 3 to 4 squads put together, that makes a platoon. When you have 3 to 4 platoons put together, that makes a company. When you have 3 to maybe 5 or 6 companies together, that makes a battalion. A battalion can be anywhere from about 400 up to 600 troops. Above battalion, you have what is called a brigade or a regiment, and that can be about 2,000 troops. So as a lieutenant colonel, I was in command of about 400 to 500 troops.
So you're overseas during or post 9/11 and before you left, right?
Well, no. After going to Fort Hood, Texas, with the Fourth Infantry Division,
Uh-huh.
that's when I deployed in 2003 to Iraq
Got it.
with the battalion I was in command of.
Got it. So at this point, that's 22 years. That's right, 1980. Well,
2004. Yeah.
okay, 2004, and you just decided, you know what, that's enough. Uh, I've had my career. It was great. I want to go do other things. Or what led to your? I think this is about time for me to find something else.
Well, there was a very interesting thing that happened over in Iraq. And one of the things that my dad and my older brother taught me when I was a second lieutenant, you always have to take care of your troops in
Mm.
combat. And so I made a decision. We had an Iraqi police officer that we felt was providing information to the Saddam Fedayeen, the insurgents. And we had seen a spike in roadside bombing attacks and things of this nature. This guy was not forthcoming with information. So I used a psychological intimidation tactic of firing my 9 millimeter Beretta pistol over his head into a weapons clearing barrel, and he, gave us information. I reported
Perfect.
myself to my commanding officer, and there was a disciplinary action that was taken. I was fined $5,000, and when I got back from Iraq, I looked at the wife and I said, maybe it's time for me to retire because I don't know, where the Army is going, and I'm at the pinnacle. I've been a battalion commander. I've been in combat, and so let's raise our family. Let's take care of our daughters. Let's follow your
Yeah.
career. And so in 2004, ended up we moved to South Florida. Followed her. She got an offer with Raymond James down there, the wealth management advisors, and I taught high school for a year, and that was such an enjoyable experience, Ben, that I volunteered to go back to Afghanistan as a civilian military advisor.
We've got a lot of comments here saying thank you for your service. So yes, 100%. Thank you for your service. And what you had just said that you experienced there with that Iraqi police officer, yeah, that just makes logical sense. So thank you for doing that. Just saying, that's the smart thing. To put a bow on this, on your military career, if you look back 1982 until 2004, right? Is that right? Yeah, 1982, 2004. What did you see? Name the first thing that comes to your mind, or the biggest thing that you can think of that you saw over the evolution of the military itself over those 22 years. What changed during those 22 years that when you left said, you know what, this is we're killing it on this, man. We're doing great on this. I'm so proud of our military. That's something that you left and went, this is really, really good. And then I'll also ask you, before you even answer that one, the follow-up is, what did you see towards the end when you left going, I got some concerns?
Well, I would tell you that when I remember the wall coming down, uh, I remember the time when I went on the other side of that wall. And
Yeah.
so it was very humbling to know that in my time of service that we saw that wall finally come down. And if you remember Ronald Reagan saying to Mikhail Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had men and women of such strong character and resolve that would stand on freedom's ramparts and make sure that that wall came down, and I could be a part of that, be a part of that team. Those brothers and sisters, those band of brothers, as we call it. That was very humbling and very honorable.
Hmm.
And I would also say that adding in the 2.5 years that I spent in Afghanistan, even after I retired, I still had to wear a uniform, still had to keep up military appearance and everything, working with the Afghan Army. But to see those little girls be able to go to school for the first time, something that they had never would have thought they'd have
Right.
the chance to do, was very humbling. Now you fast forward and look at what has happened today. I've seen too much encroachment of politicization into our military
Right.
instead of us understanding what our mission, our role, and our function is. And so I think that's my big concern, is that we're turning our military into an ideological arm instead of us understanding that they're there to do one thing: support and defend the Constitution. That's the oath that we take.
Is there an example that you could give of that, where the politicization of this?
Oh, sure. I mean, anyone can look at, General Mark Milley. You can look at this new chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles Q. Brown. Go and look at some of the things he has said. We now have a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who, as the chief of staff of the United States Air Force, top man in the United States Air Force, said that he only believes that we need 46% white pilots in the Air Force. I could care less about your skin color. I just want to make sure that you can fly the aircraft and you can deliver the munitions where they're supposed to go, or you can deliver, paratroopers or whatever. You can do your job. But that is where we've gotten to. Or you have a Secretary of Defense in Lloyd Austin, someone that I knew that served at Fort Bragg when I was serving at Fort Bragg. And now he's sending out memos to the force, saying that female troops need to be prepared to share their facilities with biological males. That's not the military. That's not our business. That's not our job.
I see. I see. Now, it wasn't to the end that I connected those dots about where it is. And we can circle back to this, but I want to make sure we get to some of the other stuff. So, because you were also in Congress in Florida's, I think it said the 22nd district down there.
And that's a different combat zone. So you need to be armed up there more so than when you're in an active combat zone.
Now, were you, I wouldn't say recruited, but did somebody come to you and say, have you ever thought about running for Congress? Or was it your decision?
Yeah. No.
So someone came to you and your first response was what? Like, yes, or what? I don't think so. Like, what was your first thought?
Yeah. You gotta be shitting me. I mean,
right.
Yeah, I mean, career military guys, we don't think about politics so much, but we do think about service to our country. And so Donna Brossamer down in South Florida, and I was still in Afghanistan. I just happened to be back for about 10 days of a break. She came to me and said, your oath of service to the country and your oath to the Constitution does not end because you're officially out of uniform. It must continue on. And that was a gut punch.
That's a guilt trip.
And I think that we need to have more veterans that continue to look at how they can serve their country in city council, school board, county commission, as sheriffs, like your dad did, and other levels of governance of this country. Because when you have taken an oath and you've been willing to lay down your life for it, that's completely different from the chucklehead politicians that I saw up there in Washington, D.C., that are just looking at how they can enrich themselves or they can enrich special interests. They're not putting the interests of the country first and foremost.
So when you were in Congress, at any point were you going, yeah, this isn't for me. This is wildly different. They're similar but different, right? It's like a juxtaposition, comparing apples and oranges, similar but not really. Did you enjoy your time there?
I enjoyed serving my country. I enjoyed serving the constituents in the district. When you're out and about at the Publix grocery store or something like that, and some woman comes up and they recognize you and they're saying, I'm having this kind of problem or that kind of problem, and you help them out. Or when a veteran comes up to you and say, hey, look, I really need to find my service record. I need to find these awards that I once had. And you can rectify that situation. You can come back and pin that award on him at a ceremony, or you get the chance to go to a small business and you talk to the people in the small business, or you get to go around and speak at the high schools and speak to the junior ROTC cadets and tell them, I used to be a junior ROTC cadet, and look at what it enabled me to be today. So that is what I absolutely enjoyed. The thing that I did not like about being in Washington, D.C. was the amount of deception and the lies that people will tell to you. And you would know that they're lying. They know that they know that they're lying, and they will still try to do that. I just want you to be truthful. I want you to stand for something. And I have never seen an organization or an entity where they don't get their job done and they still get paid, and they still get to take a 30 to 40-day recess in the summer. In the military, if you don't go home till the mission's done. And you think about in the military, you can, your wife can be given birth. If you're deployed, you stay over there. You don't get to go home just to see your child be born. But yet we have people, and this comes to where we are right now with this whole budget crisis. The only thing that the Constitution mandates for the United States Congress to do every year is to pass a budget. And regular order means that you pass 12 separate appropriations bills. We're $33 trillion in debt because no one is doing what the Constitution mandates them to do. But yet we continue to reelect these people. We continue to allow them to wastefully spend the money that we send there to Washington, D.C., many times against our own interests. And something has to change about that. So
Hmm.
if there's one thing that I did not like was the fact that, you have people that were putting their own self-interest and special interests above the American interest.
I would assume for someone with your career in the military and your career path during your time in the military, that would have been very challenging and frustrating for
Yeah,
someone
it
like you.
was.
It just absolutely had to have been.
Yeah, it was, and that's why Republicans redistricted me out of the congressional district that I represented. And you would have thought that in the history of Florida at that time, there had only been two Black Republican members of Congress from that state. The first one was Josiah T. Walls, who served from 1873 to 1876, and I was the second one.
What?
But yeah, but yet because my yes was a yes, my no was a no, my oath was always to the Constitution. That made people uncomfortable. And then in 2012, you can go back and look at it. I was the number one target of the Democrat Party in the United States of America. You can't have a black constitutional conservative, combat veteran with a well-educated wife, nice family, going out and about the country talking about principles and values and things of this nature, and not talking about being a victim. The congressional race that I had in 2012, my reelection race, very first reelection race, I think it is still either the second or the third most expensive congressional race in the history of the United States of America.
You were a threat
I guess
to
so.
the Democratic Party.
And the Republicans.
And the Republicans.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's very disheartening to hear, to be honest.
Yeah, but really, Ben, that's how it should be.
What?
Uh, no, that's how it should be. Because if we don't understand that we can't be locking ourselves into a party mentality. We have to be locking ourselves into a mentality that we're going to do the right thing by governing the United States of America based upon our rule of law, our Constitution. And if we can continue to expose these people that are saying that we don't want anybody that's coming in and upsetting our apple cart, I think that that's a good thing. So
Uh,
I actually, take it as a badge of honor that neither political party wanted me to be in Washington D.C.
that's crazy. Oh my goodness. We don't want logical, rational, reasonable people. No. Yeah. Get out of here. So we're already we're almost at 40 minutes already. I know we can go a little bit longer. And we, again, as we said at the very beginning, we could talk all day about your stuff, but let's try to catch us up to where we are now.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're no longer in Congress. What year are we in right about at this point?
That was about a decade ago.
Okay.
So yeah. So over the last decade, I've had some great opportunities to go out and work with conservative policy centers. Right, like I said, right now, I'm the executive director of the American Constitutional Rights Union. That's what has brought me to Wisconsin on this trip. It's an organization that's been around for about 28 years. It was the founding board member was Ronald Reagan's Attorney General Edwin Meese, and they were established to be the counterbalance to the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, because we got to get back to talking about the Constitution and constitutional rights, because we just see too much of a usurpation and an intrusion of an onerous federal government. And we've got to get them back into that very constraining and restraining document that the Constitution is, that tells them what their enumerated powers are, and those powers that aren't specifically delegated to them, they go to the states and to the people. So we've got to understand that relationship. I also have my own podcast program called Steadfast and Loyal. You
What?
can find that on YouTube and Rumble. Just type in Steadfast and Loyal, and it will pop up. And
Steadfast and what was the second word? Loyal or royal?
Loyal,
Oh,
Steadfast and Loyal.
loyal.
That
Got
is
it.
the motto of the 4th Infantry Division.
Got it. And also, I'm going to be looking up usurpation. I've never heard that word before. I don't even know what that word means. So, the word that you
Usurpation means when someone comes down and they're wrongfully taking something away from you. Uh, they're assuming rights, freedoms, and liberties, or as I don't know if you've ever read the essay by Frederick Bastiat called "The Law."
no.
It really does explain the relationship between the federal government or government period and the individual. The government is supposed to protect three things for you: your life, your liberty, and your property. But what we see right now is a government that's making more and more decisions about your life, your liberty, and your property, and taking those things away from you. And that's what I mean by usurping or usurpation of those things.
Sure. So the constitutional part. I know, well, at least at DrydenWire, well, sometimes we get accused of being too far right, sometimes too far left. The reality is we don't write any political articles, and we're just in the middle. And the reason why, it's not even really the middle, just for me personally, it's the Holy Bible is the greatest authority, the highest authority, and that supersedes everything, followed by the Constitution. That's it. Like and I don't know what political party that falls into. I don't think it does, and maybe it does. I don't know, but just that's it. I believe in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I believe in our founding fathers and our Constitution. It's not that difficult for me. Do you think that there are people because we have Republican and Democrat, and I have no problem that we have Republicans going after Democrats in terms of actually elected politicians, fine. But it's the average citizen who is 100% Republican, 100% Democrat, and that kind of, we can't find any common ground. Are you concerned at this point about the partisanship just in society?
Well, I will tell you that we need to move beyond, talking about party politics, and we need to talk about two very different and conflicting philosophies of governance. When you talk about, conservatism, constitutional conservatism, which is classical liberalism, going back to John Locke, natural rights theory, second treatise of government, that all of your rights and your liberties come from a creator God. That's what Thomas Jefferson quoted in the Declaration of Independence: the laws of nature, nature's God. That's what constitutional conservatism is to that, what was once classical liberalism. But on the other side, you have this progressivism, socialism, Marxism, communism, statism that talks about wealth redistribution, nationalizing economic production, creating and expanding, the welfare, the dependency society, and that welfare state. Social egalitarianism, that everyone is equal. That's what equity is all about. It's not about the quality of outcomes. It says that here's a kid born in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, in the Blacks-only hospital, and now he's sitting around talking with Ben Dryden on his podcast show up here in Wisconsin. And then the secular humanism, because Karl Marx was an atheist, because he did not want people to believe in a higher power. He wanted people to believe in government with a little g, not God with a big G. So I think that we have to go back and start having a discussion about the right and true and proper relationship between the individual and the institution of government. And the individual in the United States of America is sovereign and supreme because their life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness comes from a sovereign God, the creator God, Judeo-Christian God. And I will refer people back to Joshua chapter 1, verses 5 through 9. And that's one of my favorite verses. And in there, God tells Joshua, this book of the law, you shall not turn from it from the right or to the left. You shall meditate upon it day and night. And as long as you do that, you will have success and prosperity wherever you go. Well, you just brought it out. We need to go back and study that book of the law, which the Bible is, because the Judeo-Christian faith heritage is the fundamental principle upon which this nation was established. I mean, our rule of law, do not kill, do not murder, all these type of things. But then we also need to study our own constitution, our own rule of law. Because when you look at what is happening on our border, it's a violation of our Constitution. When you look at some of the onerous intrusions of the federal government, where does it say in the Constitution the federal government can tell me what type of stove to have in my house, what type of car I'm going to drive, okay, or any state government to do that? So we have got to start understanding that if we don't protect the life, the liberty, and property of the individuals, if we start to go down the path of a government that can tell you your buy and your leave, as it used to be once upon a time, and what you can do, what you can say, what you can eat, where you can go, then we're losing the essence of who we are as the greatest nation and the longest running constitutional republic that the world has ever known.
Do you see that ever happening? I 100% agree with everything you just said, that we need to. Are we ever going to? What would it take for us to?
I think that the left has given us all the ammunition that we need. And I think when you look at the taking away of parental rights, when you have people that are saying your children are not yours, they're ours. That's what Jill Biden, Kamala Harris, and Karine Jean-Pierre said. When you have a person like Terry McAuliffe in 2021 said in the Virginia gubernatorial debate that parents do not have a right to decide what their children are being taught, I mean, they're telling you that not even your children belong to you. That if you don't, quote unquote, affirm your child's decision or your behaviors, we'll take your child away from you. So I think that you're going to see more people waking up and saying, no, time out on the court. You can't come in here and take away my child. You can't come here and take away my stove. You can't come here and take away my car, my livelihood. Uh, COVID should have taught us a very interesting lesson that we cannot have a government that comes down and shuts down our lives and our livelihoods. You know, because shouldn't we be making the decision about what members of Congress get paid? Shouldn't we be making decisions about them? Since, after all, they're supposed to be serving us.
Mm.
It's our resources that go toward the government. So why is it the government is telling us what we can be paid, what we can't be paid, which business can be open, which business cannot be open? So, and show me in the Constitution where government has that enumerated power to
Yeah.
make that decision.
So,
So I think civics education is so important, Ben. I think that what you're doing is so important because we have to have these conversations. We have to inform. We have to educate. We have to activate people.
well, thank you for that. Sincerely, thank you. And as the executive director of the American Constitutional Rights Union, you had just mentioned that you're up here in Wisconsin right now for a bit. Wait, where are you? Since we didn't get time to go through some of that last decade that we're talking about, where do you actually live? What state?
I live right outside Dallas, Texas.
All right, so you're still in Texas. So
Yeah.
you're up here for that. So when you're, is this part of like everything you just got finished talking about? Is this a part of that American Constitutional Rights Union? And
Yeah.
when is that why you're up here? Is it like a speaker, like you go around and you're talking to other people and sharing things like this?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Sure.
I mean, I've been blessed with an incredible platform. I'm going down to speak to some state legislators here as soon as I finish with you to talk about, ranked choice voting. That's something we don't want to have here in Wisconsin. And I want to talk to people about why we shouldn't have that. And also, our election processes and procedures and election integrity. It was uncovered up here in Wisconsin after the last election, a very huge voter fraud happening in our senior assisted living facilities and also our memory care facilities. You can't have people in a memory care facility voting, 100% of the time. I mean, you're talking about people that don't know what day it is, but yet they have a 100% voting record. So, we've got to follow up on some of these things to make sure we're protecting what we call our vulnerable voters.
Someone asked in here the questions. Oh, there it is right there. It'd be remiss not to bring it up. Tamara said, what are the titles of the book? So it's on our website, DrydenWire.com. We put in his bio. And I think I had it written down somewhere, but what are those books? I can't find what the titles are.
Sure. The very first book is called Guardian of the Republic, An American Ronin's Journey to Family, Faith, and Freedom. It's kind of like a philosophical biography that I wrote. The second book is called Hold Texas, Hold the Nation, which is kind of a comparative economic analysis of the state of Texas and the state of California. And then the last book is called We Can Overcome, an American Black Conservative Manifesto. Because everyone thinks that this whole Black conservative thing is really new. We talk about Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, and we talk about conservative principles and values in the Black community and how we have to get back to that. So those are the three books.
Speaking of that and of race, and I don't like really talking too much about it. I don't want to have it necessarily a spotlight of things or a focus. But with that said, where are we right now, you think? From, I think people would be interested from a Black person's perspective rather than a white person's perspective. And I live in, rural North Wisconsin. It's like 99% Caucasian people. You travel the world. You're in the South. You over in the East Coast, etc. You're everywhere. National media, there's always a narrative. You could argue if that's good or bad. Probably mostly bad, but it doesn't matter. It is what it is. What do you see? Do you see that racism is worse now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Pardon me. Or we're getting better, but we're not there yet. Is it better or worse than a decade ago?
Well, I want you to think about the fact that I had a dad that was born in 1920 in South Alabama, grew up in South Georgia. My mom was 1931 in South Georgia. We're nowhere near what they lived through. And again, I'm 62 years of age. I was born in a Blacks only hospital in 1961. Yeah. But just read my bio. And I think that attests to where we have come here in the United States of America. However, cultural Marxism is all about finding means by which they can create division. Originally supposed to be socioeconomic. But what the Marxists of today in the United States of America want to do is to divide us based upon race. And that's why you have 1619 Project, all of this stuff saying that America was founded, when the first slaves arrived, not July the 4th of 1776. So I think it's so important that we realize that the progressive socialist left is trying to make race an issue because they're trying to hold on to a voting base, which I must admit they are killing off. Some 20 million black babies have been murdered in the womb since Roe v. Wade. They're trying to replace. You look at what is happening with the murders of blacks in Chicago, Detroit, all your major urban population centers. There's no white person from Wisconsin going down and shooting black kids in these inner city communities. This is black on black crime. But you won't hear the media talking about that.
I don't know if we can. I think that's just one of those things you can't talk about.
No, but you have to. See,
agreed.
This is one of the things that my white conservative brothers and sisters must break through. If you continue to respond to being called a racist, they're going to continue to call you a racist. But white progressive liberals and socialists will go into the black community and spread their poison of victimization and victimhood. The white leftist media will not talk about the real issues that are facing the black community. The biggest issue that is hurting the black community right now is fatherlessness. When I was born, the traditional nuclear family in the black community was 75 to 77%. Today it's 24%. Ouch. And how did that happen? Lyndon Johnson, Great Society Programs, 1965. Giving checks out to women who have children out of wedlock, regardless of how many children they have out of wedlock, but they could not have a working man in the home. So the government came in and replaced the father, which was a stabilizing effect in the black community. What would have happened to Allen West if he did not have a dad that sat him down at the age of 15 and challenged him to be the first officer in the family?
I don't know if I even want to think about that.
So this is why everyone needs to talk about these issues and stop allowing people to draw a box and put you in that box to say that you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, because they certainly are.
That's great words of advice. Thank you so much. I have one quick question for you here, because you brought up some scripture. How has faith, you just said that where would you be today if it wasn't for your father and your father in your home and your parents? Where would you be today if you didn't have faith? How has that played a role in your your bio, again, is just ridiculous. How has that played a role in your life?
I wouldn't be where I am. And as a matter of fact, I would offer people, I just gave a convocation address speech at Liberty University in September. And I want you can post it and get that out there.
Yeah.
But I talked about, the top 10 verses in my life that have enabled me to be a champion for Christ. So, you can go and watch that video. It's about maybe 35 minutes long, the actual speech that I gave. And that will tell you everything. And I will tell you, the military taught me to always carry your 3x5 cards, write down your notes. And one of my note cards in here are my top 10 Bible verses. So.
Come on. You're an impressive man.
I do okay.
Yep, I do okay.
I do okay. I'm a Southern boy. I just learned how to read and wear shoes a couple of years ago.
Oh, I love it. What an absolute pleasure. You are welcome on anytime you want. I am going to go and check out, and hopefully everybody does as well, you're steadfast and loyal on, we can find that on YouTube, right?
YouTube and Rumble, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to be going and listening to that as well. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, thank you so very much for coming on. It was an absolute honor and a pleasure. Special thank you to our guest today, Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union and ACRU Action Fund, constitutional conservative, combat veteran, and former member of the U.S. Congress, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, for blocking out some time to come on for a chat with us this morning. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, saying thank you for watching and have a blessed day.